Hi and welcome. My name is Matt Saucy. I am a mind mapper, and I welcome all you mind mappers to this presentation in 2022. I am a family law attorney, and am using mind mapping as a tool to help parents bridge their differences and work through problems. I am a attorney, mediator, parent facilitator, parent coordinator. After 30 years, don't we have a lot of titles? So, be that as it may, I wanted to make this presentation fun because I know the last mind mapping presentation I went to was extremely boring. And I didn't want to do that to anybody again. I'm still carrying the scars of that event with me. It's been 2 years ago. It's not good. So let's begin. When I speak of conflict management, I need to talk about the history of conflict management. So we need to go way back. So when we talk about it, we talk about the first known ever recorded case of when conflict happened. And so we figure this happened about 50 million years ago when the dinosaurs were around. And basically, with the dinosaurs, there would be a fight for a particular prize. And so a particular prize might be a dying or dead animal. So as we figured it out and we went through the videos to see how dinosaurs interacted, we saw that their approach pretty much, or their conflict style, was kill or be killed. So I need to kill you so I can get to resolve the conflict that I have, which for the dinosaurs seemed to work for hundreds of millions of years. Eventually, the kill or kill be conflict management style, perhaps maybe it was the death of the dinosaur. We're not exactly sure, but we know the dinosaur is no longer here. So when the dinosaurs died off, we humans had a chance to give it a go. And we pretty much adapted the dinosaur kill or be killed model, which again seemed to be rather extreme. So people began to think, and they thought about perhaps a different way of resolving conflict. So our conflict resolution system evolved and people began to think and think. And so understanding that conflict, that kill or be killed wasn't the best way to resolve conflict, they came up with another approach. And approach that they came up to was perhaps they wouldn't die in the middle of this conflict, but perhaps they might lose an arm or a leg. So, and that seemed to work for a little bit. But then sooner or later, people began to realize that why would I want to run the risk of losing an arm or a leg? Years later, I might need these things. And so this seemed to be not a good approach of trying to resolve conflict. So again, people began to evolve and their brains grew more and more, which is fantastic. So we started to see conflicts be resolved pretty efficiently, and they pretty darn good models came up out of this. So we came up with courts, and each person had their say. And that was fantastic because the courts would hear the evidence, the court would hear the attorneys, and everyone had a way to resolve their conflict in a way that no one died, no one lost their arms or legs, and everybody went their peaceful way. So it was a rainbow and a unicorn thing, as model as I would say. The problem was for family law, that sort of got busted. And it got busted kind of badly. Um, and this was during that wave in the 50s and 60s when women wanted to have their independence and the family structure was not working for them. And financial equality and all these good things. So there was a revolution. So desperate to reduce their docket size, courts refer these cases to mediation. And so to separate the parties and move them forward, the mediators came up with certain ways of resolving conflict, which is I as mediator know what you should do. This is what you need to do. Everybody sign it. Have a nice day. Or the mediator started to say, let's interact. And let's do win-win. Let's do lose-lose, whatever. So the divorce system separated the parents. That was fine. The problem is in the 70s and 80s, that's not what parents wanted. Parents wanted to co-parent. Parents wanted to interact. Parents, whether or not they knew this or not, needed to start relating to each other. So imagine the fighting continued. So the problem with this is nobody really wanted this. And this was fighting before, this was after. Kids didn't want this. Obviously, being in the middle of conflict was not what they signed up for when they were born into this world. They thought they were born out of the love of their parents. The constant fighting did not seem to work with anyone else as well. So society is looking for a change here. When we started thinking about conflict management, we started to realize these people needed to do three things: listen, understand, and respond. All important things. So people started to think, pretty smart people. And when they started looking at this, they began to break down what is conflict. So, but before we begin in this, and we're on all unicorns and things of that sort, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to stop, because I might have lost a few of you during this. I've been an attorney 30 years, and as I have thought about things, my thoughts have advanced over time, just because the nature of the beast. So I will ask you, do you believe in miracles? I believe in miracles because I've seen them. So I will say this: we need to start to define conflict differently. Conflict may simply be a misunderstanding in what you perceive to be something where the parties can never get through their differences. You may be just wrong. There may be an inability to communicate based on the emotions, based on the fact that these people want nothing to do with each other. And so we throw in a couple fun ones: penny pincher, gaslighter, alienator. Basically they're going to hurl these things away to hurt, to avoid hurt, to separate, and express anger, because divorce is not a very fun thing. But this is not the deep entrenched conflict of other individuals. Let's say for soccer fans, or God forbid, MSNBC and Fox News viewers. We're never going to separate those two, nor should we ever have those two in the same room. Not a good idea. So the co-parent conflict is typically not that entrenched. They actually have the similar goals, and they want to relate to each other on some level. They just don't know how. So we need to breach this conflict. And what may look like a wall, we need to start looking at brick by brick. Because when we look at this by brick, we can start understanding where people are getting their misunderstandings. So when I look at a wall between parents, I see them say, I have nothing to say. And all these things mean something. It means this is how the wall was created. So we need to tear down this wall. We need to tear down misunderstandings. And we need to figure out where the actual conflict is. Because most of the time, it's maybe 10%. And they didn't even really realize it because they haven't communicated and they haven't figured out a way to talk. So mind mapping gives them this opportunity. And it gives them this opportunity because they're not interacting with each other. They're interacting through the board, or they're interacting through the mediator. And that's what relational mediators like, right? Is to say you're mediating, we're going through me, we're having the communication through me, we're transition, we're recognizing, I'm empowering you through the process. Through the board, just like the mediator, we're presenting them with a kid-centered approach. Work the problem. And we know you have similar goals. And so for your skeptics out there, because I used to be one, I always used to think at this moment that what the parents truly thought at this moment was, sure, there might be the whiteboard, but there's better ways of handling this, perhaps not legal ones. For the mediator, we need to be centered. Or if you're handling the board and you're the mind mapper, you need to be centered. You need to be an active listener. Most importantly, you need to allow the parents to interact with the board. We need to make sure these problems are stated. Each is going to want to say that. From there, we're able to get through the misunderstandings and we're able to identify the conflict, which is extremely important. A couple rules that we have, we will walk in with goals and not positions. State your goals. I do not want to hear a position, ever. I want you to work the problem. You're parents. I don't want to hear about nonsense. And I certainly don't want to see this. So basically, when we come in, we're all adults. You're the parents, and you have kids to take care of. So we've seen it. We've done it. We've asked you to try it. So anyway, that is our mind mapping presentation, and I will see you in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. So we're going to take two on this. This is Matt Saucy. I'm a family law attorney down in Texas. No, I do not have a horse or a gun, but I am a family law mediator. I'm a family law attorney. I do parent facilitation work and I do amicus work. So I'm more, after 30 years of practice, I'm more in tune with helping people solve their problems than create more problems. So anyway, when we're talking about divorce, we use mind mapping and we use it very effectively in a relational sense. And our biggest thing is we want parents to listen, understand, and respond to each other. That is where we go. In order to do that, we want to do a thing called an empowerment shift. People have to move from point A, where they're not necessarily liking each other a whole lot, to point B, where they can tolerate each other enough that we can have a conversation. Didn't say like, but we need to talk. If we can talk, we can do. So let's go through an example of what it is I'm talking about. Parents are present in our room, actually this room. And we have basically 3 chairs. I'm in the middle. Why? Because they can't hurt each other if I'm in the middle. So what we do is we will state our goals. Our goals are very important. Typically, the parents' goals will mirror each other. From time to time, they will not. At this point, we will have use of emojis, so everybody gets on the same page. And we let these parents get away with what they need to at this point. So let's have a situation where we have a child mom believes the child is diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder. Mom believes this because those teachers at the school told her so to get a check. She went to a doctor and she actually has prescribed medication. So for her, this is 2 + 2 = 4. So for mom's goal is to make sure that the child is doing well in school. Child's happy. Child's needs are being met. So, Dad, at this point, might throw out emoji. And his emoji would be like, I don't think so. I want to make sure the child's doing well. I have no problem with that. We're okay on these 2 things. I want my child to be happy. I want my child's needs, and I want my child to do well in school. But I'm not okay with the way mom is handling her business with this ADD. His goals are not to be alienated, not for the child not rush to judgment, and to be included in decisions. Because when mom had the school talk to her, he was not told anything about prescription medication. He was not told anything about ADD. So he feels alienated. From there, this sparks a conversation. And where we go with this typically is we say, well, what is the problem? State your problem. I don't address the elephant in the room, which is the emotions, right? Because there's no point, not at the beginning. So what we do is we start addressing the problem. So for mom, and I'm going to start putting these in different colors because it just makes sense if we do it that way. Mom is green, dad is purple. So I'm going to rechange this down here so everything's purple for dad. Why do we make dad purple? I don't know. It's Friday. Mom is going to say, child had an outburst at school. Poor performance at school. Dad is still angry. So dad's problems are going to be reacting to mom. So dad would typically say something like this. The problem is poor diet. The problem is mom's mental health. This is more mom's problem than the child's problem. And lack of discipline. Typically, where we are at this point is we're able to start a conversation. So rather than the parties being positional, they become collaborative, which is really cool. But that's the whole point of this, is to get them to recognize a little bit more. So when things go well, dad is going to say, I have a question. Sorry, doing the best I can over here on these, sharing with you. I have a question. And my question is, I didn't know. So at this point, we asked mom to produce records from the school, something from the school that corroborates what she's saying. And when we are doing these things, typically I will use a white sticker. And the white signifies a resource. So the resource would be school records. School records would be something from the school saying, dear mom, your child's out of control. We need to make sure the child gets evaluated because if we have one more outburst at school, child's out. Perhaps that record was just sent to mom 2 weeks ago, and perhaps dad hasn't or has not been in contact with mom for the past 2 weeks. But timing, as you see, has everything to do with everything on these type of situations. So dad might say at this point, okay. He doesn't have to say okay, but these are conversations that we have. Okay, there's a problem. I want an independent assessment. And then it is mom's decision to say yes or no, or for us to simply continue with the conversation. Okay, so I went in great length and cost to get this. And this is only for purposes of our discussion and really for nothing else. But this is what I call, this is what the emojis do. If I can get this thing to, they reel people in. They get reeled in, and before you know it, they get fished in, which is what this is about. So when we reel people in with our emojis, we begin to have them start talking. So if dad's saying, I didn't know, we can start having a conversation, why not? And then they can start talking. And again, they start collaborating. And Dad might realize that this may be something to do more about his inaction or his lack of knowledge than anything else. He might feel a little bit more using the word empathy for mom's situation, understanding where mom was in her requirement to have the child assessed, and that it wasn't about him being alienated. So we go back to here, right? So his goal is not alienated. Well, okay, this seems to be okay because mom's telling me her story. So there's one less thing. But you know, while I hear mom was rushed and so I'm not alienated, I don't want there to be a rush to judgment. This child is 6 years old, and I don't want this child being given medication. So we go down the line of what are different things that we can do. Okay? So when we go down our line, we can do an independent assessment. We can address the issues of poor diet. So we can say, you know what? These are our options. Independent assessment. Change diet. And that's my delta. Sorry. Change diet. And maybe we need to be on the same about how we discipline. Maybe that's a conversation these parents start to have. But the important thing about all these things is we're having a conversation. We are collaborating. We are not fighting. And so, as an option, I can say, sure, let me give you the names of some people who do assessments. I know 3. Person A, person B, person C. And then we can also talk about at this moment, right, is being, when we talk about dad being involved in decisions, we can talk about what does mom know that dad does not. So let me try to change this.